So in today's episode of Smalls That Sell, we are going to hack a cabin. Well, really not a cabin itself, but the contents of a particular cabin. So I know what you're probably thinking. So why are we breaking down items from this particular cabin and not the old PB or Hobby Lobby or whatever? Well, wait until you see this thing. It was packed full of evergreen items from all of these stores, which means it'll pretty much sell year round. So recently the family and I decided to take a little weekend trip, rented a cabin in the mountains, and whenever we walked into this place, this is what we saw. So I love cabins, probably because most everything's made out of wood inside of a cabin, but this one in particular was completely different than the others that I had stayed in. Usually cabins have this traditional style with being outfitted with log style furniture, things like that, but this was like a modern rustic with a different color wall panels and very, very creative staging. And yes, in this case, all of these decorations are actually staging because they want people to come back or come in the first place. So as soon as I walked into this place, my brain went crazy. I'm like, that's awesome. I can build that. That's cool. I can definitely build that. Oh, I can build that. I can build that. Oh, that's going to be a big seller. So I started snapping some pictures so we could break some of these items down together, because the end goal for this series is for you to be just like that. Walk into any place and anything that you see that catches your eye, you can just simply look at it and say, I can build that. So one of the first areas of this cabin that caught my eye was the fireplace. So check out this overall scene. This is a beautifully and very, very simply designed area. So to start with, why is there always a market for cabin style decor? So I kind of have a theory on this. So I'm sure that you've all seen the pictures on the internet where it shows this little cabin or cottage in the woods by a lake or however, and it says, would you trade your house for this, or something like that? And most of the time people's answers are yes. And the reason why is because psychologically cabins are associated with relaxing, peace, nature. And for the most part, these are all things that we want or enjoy. So anything out there that reminds someone of that peaceful setting that they can bring into their home, most of the time, they're going to do it. And again, something like this may not be your style at all. But what they've done here by making this entire cabin modern rustic is kind of made it everyone's style. You still have this cabin feel, but this clean look. No, I'm not telling you to go out and build a fireplace. So let's talk about a few things that you see in this picture. I want to explain to you just how easy that this was done so you can take the concepts that they used and apply it to your builds. So for one thing, this whole fireplace section is completely flat against the wall. The fireplace itself is inset into the wall, and the very bottom sticks out a little bit so that you sit on it or however. But it gives it this three-dimensional look like it's a built-out fireplace just based on the way that they have designed it. But if you look at it from a side angle, the trim that goes around the actual fireplace insert, 1/2 inch thick. And look at the joinery for that. It's just butt joints. And all of this stuff is just brad nailed to this wall. Okay, so now take a look at this mantle. So this rustic old-looking mantle that they have, it actually was wood, but it wasn't old wood. So all that they had done is taken a wire wheel and a grinder, removed the soft wood, stained this thing up, and mounted it to a wall. It looked great. And out of the items that were sitting on the mantle, there was one thing that caught my eye. Check out these little wooden trees in the corner. So for one thing, the staging was perfect for this type of an item. Sitting on a rustic looking mantle, it has a nice backdrop, and there's even a little pine cone in the front of this thing, which they probably bought from the old PB for about 45 bucks. And items like this will not only be great for the upcoming holiday season, but the way that they're actually designed, they make an excellent decoration for year round. And the best part of all is how these things are made. If you notice this little seam in the middle of these trees, that means that they took two pieces of wood, stacked them on top of each other, stenciled out or just sketched out in my case, just a profile of half of a tree. Then with two boards stacked together, just jigsawed it out. Once you have your stencil or sketch, and whenever I say stencil, you can just go online and type in clip art of a tree, print out that page, fold it in half, cut that out, and actually just use that as your template to trace a half tree onto your board. And once you have your two halves, you'll just fasten those together. If you decided to use pocket hole screws, you would just throw a couple of extra ones on each side of the trunk part and fasten it to a little block of wood. And that's it. And for the material for this would be a perfect pallet wood or fence picket project. These two trees are the exact same size. They just have them offset to create dimension. But if for me, I would actually make a few different sizes and sell them as a set. So I have some exciting news, especially for those who like the way that I teach, My Woodworking Kickstart course from novice to natural is launching soon. So whenever I first decided to dive into woodworking as my full-time career, I had one goal in mind: to reach and teach. I wanted to design a course that anyone could take regardless of skill level, and teach that course in a way that anyone could understand. And we'll start from the very basics, ensuring that you have a solid foundation to build from. Each project is carefully designed to introduce new skills to build upon skills that you've learned in the previous project. And by using this method of progressing step by step, you'll find yourself ready and even excited to tackle the next challenge with confidence. So I figured out a long time ago, the best way to teach someone to do anything is if they're right there with you. And that's exactly what I do during this course. By doing it this way, you're going to get the same attention to detail and practical advice, just as if we were working side by side. Each project is more than just a thing. It is an opportunity to learn a new set of skills, how to troubleshoot and tackle problems that we may run into. And that's just a drop in the bucket. So if you keep that learning mindset, my goal for you is by the end of this course, you'll have the knowledge and confidence to build anything that you want. So while we're putting the final touches on the course, in the meantime, you can go to the course website, and I'll make sure to throw a link in the description, and you can check out what this course is all about. So after I left the Fireplace area, I just started exploring this place and soaking it all in. Of course, every single step that I took, my brain's going into overload. Look down at the stair banister as I'm walking up, and I'm like, that's a 6x6 post. That's a 2x6 on the top and the bottom. 2x4s in the middle. That's all that they have done is bored in holes for rebar. Genius. And at some point I noticed this Scrapwood Decor. Okay, so that's what I'm going to call it. I don't know what they really call it, but we've actually broken down a similar item to this in the past. But there's a few key differences in this one that actually set it apart from the one that we previously covered. And there were actually a couple of different examples of this Scrapwood village art or whatever again, just throughout the house used in different applications. So this is awesome because it is unique. It has this folky kind of style to it, and you can use reclaimed wood or new wood. Just so I could kind of measure things out, I just took a picture of my hand beside it. So speaking of that, here's a little tip for whenever you are out someplace and you want to break something down like this, but you don't have a tape measure with you. You can get a lot of different dimensions off of something just by using your hand. You just have to measure certain points. This is something that I learned a long time ago, and I use it all the time. So as an example, from the first joint of my pinky to the very tip, it's exactly 1 inch. And then from the palm of my hand to the tip of my middle finger, that is 8 inches long. And then if I give like the little surfer sign or whatever this is supposed to mean, from the tip of this finger to the tip of this finger is 7.5 inches. So I know it's kind of weird that I know the dimensions of my hands and fingers, but I'm always breaking down items. Maybe I need to add a tape measure to my collection here. We'll see. Okay, so we know that this is only about 8 inches tall and probably about 10 inches wide. So that means that the blocks that they've used for this little village is actually really small end cuts. So the widest that I see here would only be about 3.5 inches, so a piece of a 2x4. Then they have a little narrower block kind of like this, then a couple pieces with a little angle or whatever. But you could literally do this out of scrap. And then for the tops, if you notice, the grain is running the opposite direction. So they've just taken a little piece of scrap wood and cut it at an angle. Most likely just glued all that into place, threw in a couple brad nails where it could reach, and then this is where they got creative. So in the last one that we talked about, I think that they had actually burnt in the doors and the windows, but on this one, check out the hinges. So these are dirt cheap tiny hinges that you can buy on Amazon, kind of like this. You can pick up a 100-pack for like, I don't know, $3 or $4 or something, but that's all that they've used and just glued those into place. And then for the smokestacks, they just painted some bolts black, drilled a hole, and then glued those down. And I really like how they've kind of mixed everything up. Most likely they just took the material that they had, made a ton of these things, then they probably just set them beside each other just to see, you know, kind of what looks best. Glued all that together, maybe connecting it from the back, then attach it to the frame. So this frame is actually a metal frame. You do not need to do a metal frame. You could do a simple butt joint frame using picket material or pallet wood. Then to hang this, they just drilled a hole in the center of their frame, run a piece of jute cord or twine up through there, and made a loop. I don't know about you guys, but I love this folky look. I know that these things will sell like crazy, and the best thing is, they're super simple to make. So again, there were a couple of items in this cabin that incorporated these little mini village houses. And typically whenever you see multiple items using the same thing, the manufacturer of that item has taken that thing, put another twist to it, and ran with it. And that's exactly what they've done with this coat rack. And this is a super basic coat rack. At first, I thought that they had just bought these little houses, which is a good idea, just to make several different ones. People could make their own little villages and keep adding to them, but just an idea. First, I thought that they were just singles until I realized that they were actually made onto this coat rack. So that tells me that the manufacturer has a whole line of this stuff. So the little houses are to the far left. They actually left the far right completely open so you can set your own items on there, kind of like what they did with that box sign. But this would be a type of an item that is not only evergreen, but it actually serves a purpose as a coat or a hat rack. So that is going to increase your potential customer base. So the little scrapwood houses on this project are actually a little bit taller. So as you can see, I've used my little hand ruler there to determine that the tallest of the two is 6 inches. That means that the shorter one's going to be right around 4 inches tall. Now these are a little bit wider, but because of that, check out what they've done with the windows for this. It's actually just a little smaller hinge, which I think is pretty awesome because they are actually adding the next level of uniqueness to this. And again, for the taller house, they just use a bolt. And then as far as the painting on this, they just took some pastel colors with a matte finish, sanded it down a little bit, and then took a fine paintbrush and then just drew some little black lines going down. Piece of pie. And then the coat rack / shelf. It's actually just as easy to make as one of these old scrapwood houses. So this entire coat rack was only about 3 foot long, and the material used for this was around 5 inches wide. You could use a fence picket for this, or you could pick up a 1x6. A single 1x6 board would be plenty enough to do this entire rack. And again, the construction for this coat rack is super simple. So let's say that you're using 5.5 inch material. You just cut 2 boards that are 3 foot long. And I've made a little demo piece here, but then you'll just attach those 2 pieces using a butt joint. I throw in a little wood glue and put in some staples or brad nails. And then as far as our 2 little corner braces go, you'll use a scrap piece of the exact same material. Just set your saw at a 45-degree angle. And I took off just a little tip here, just so that whenever it's put into place, it's flush with the front. How you decide to space these brackets, it's going to be up to you. They have theirs flush with the outside. I would probably inset mine just a bit, glue into place, throw in some brad nails, and then stain this up. Now the only thing left to do would be to add these coat hooks, and these are actually very cheap and vintage style. You can pick them up off of Amazon for about $1 a piece. That means that if you've used picket material and scrapwood for your houses, you could essentially make this entire coat rack for less than $10. So this next piece of wall art I thought was super neat because there's actually no borders to it, and they have created a dimensional effect. So like I mentioned earlier, there is no borders to this. It kind of looks like that they're mounted to that brown board in the middle. That's just part of the wall. So these things are actually designed so you can get creative with this. If you had 2 sets of these, you could kind of offset them, look like a couple of schools of fish. I just think that it is a cool, unique design and super easy to build. So if you're standing right in front of it, you can tell that they've added this top layer of dimension. But if you look at it from the side, you can tell how they added that dimension. So there's 2 different layers to this thing. So for the bottom layer, there are 5 fish that are attached and just cut out of a single board. And to visualize this, you almost have to mentally take off those 2 outer white ones that are on top, and then the center brown one. Those are the ones that have been added on top. So with those gone, the design will be exactly the same, except it's all cut out of one solid piece. So really the only thing that you're going to need to build something like this is template of a fish, and I just now cut this one out with a jigsaw. So to get your bottom board with all 5 fish connecting, that way you can actually move this thing as a whole. Let's say that this board was longer. I would start off by taking my template and just tracing out a fish onto the bottom of this thing. And then for your next one, I would move it back, making sure that you're overlapping the first, and then trace this one out. You would just keep offsetting these all the way back. Then once you have that traced out, I would just X out any material in between that you need to remove, and then go to town with a jigsaw. Once you're done, you'll have a solid board with 5 fish templates on it. And to get the second layer of dimension, that's all that you would need to do is trace this out 3 more times, cut them out individually, paint them up a little bit differently, and then just attach them directly over 3 of the fish that are on the bottom. Now for their outside fish, they've just taken a sander or a grinder or something and just kind of hit the edges to put a little scallop look to add a little bit more detail. Then the neat part about this one, notice that the bottom 2 fish have eyes. Well, that's actually how they attached it to the wall. So they pre-drilled and put some black screws in. That way that the fasteners that they use to actually mount this blends in perfectly. Now, if you decide to build something like this, you can use any type of material that you want, but you could definitely make this entire project out of a single fence picket. Okay, so this next one I want to hit really fast just because I thought it was a very neat concept. That's this multi-dimensional wall art with the outline of the United States. So yes, if you had like a vinyl cutter or something like that, then you could put all the lettering and wording and stuff like that on it. But pretend like none of that is there. If all of the lettering was gone, that would still look super neat. So the US outline was probably cut out with a laser. Yes, you could do that with a jigsaw, but the point with this one is not necessarily what they have used, but what you can use. You can take this framed background, it's a very modern, rustic, clean look, and put any type of design on top, stained the same color as the border. This entire thing is only about 15 inches tall by about 30 inches long. For the frame itself, they just used some 1.5 by 1.5 or 1 by 1 stock, cut a little rabbet all the way around the insides, 45 the corners, and then just put that together. Now the white inside is actually just a 1/4 inch piece of plywood. And then to get this multiple board look, that's all that they have done is laid this face down on a table saw after they have painted it, raised the blade up maybe a 1/16 or 1/8 of an inch, and then cut these grooves into the wood. You could also do this with a circular saw if you wanted. So the centerpiece, it's just a 1/4 inch plywood. But again, the main takeaway from this is just how clean everything looks regardless of the shape that you decide to put in the middle. So make this backdrop or several of these backdrops and then get creative with different shapes of different items to put in the center. I could see something like this going over big for individual states, different types of animals, really. Just whatever you can dream up. Another big thing that caught my eye about this cabin was all of the interior doors. Every single door on the inside of this cabin and a couple of decorative ones on the outside looked just like this. So for all of the bedrooms, bathrooms, closets, they were hanging doors on tracks. Then even the little mini doors that covered the electrical box were built the exact same way. Then on the outside of the cabin, to make it look like there was a barn style entrance, they had these huge doors just hanging for decoration. But if you notice on all three different sizes, every single one are built the exact same way, and that's super simple. So that's all that they have done to make all of these, is to start off with the frame. So none of these back slats that you're seeing are actually inset into the frame. All of those back slats are actually attached to each other, and then the frame is just sitting on top. So to attach the backing, you could either glue that up or put in some pocket hose screws in the edges of the boards. And the framing is just as easy. For every one of these interior doors, they use the exact same width of material to make each one of these face frame pieces. So what you would do is just start off by making your outer frame. And if you noticed, they're just using butt joints. You don't even have to attach this frame to itself. So again, once you have your backing to size, go ahead and start with your outer frame and attach all of those boards, essentially making a big rectangle. Then you'll just measure in between your two vertical boards on each side and then cut and install your center board. Once that center board is installed, it's going to be super easy to find out what angles that your top and bottom angle boards are. The angle is going to change depending on the width of the door. So the easiest way to figure out what this angle is without using angle finders or anything like that is to take the board that you're going to want to install at an angle, then just lay it across your top board, and let's say that this is your center board. One edge should line up with your top board, and this angle should go across your center board. But once you have that laid out, it's all that you would need to do is mark your lines across, and you would know exactly what angle that these center boards need to be cut at. And then for the bottom angle board, it's going to be an exact duplicate of your top. And by doing it this way, you can figure out angles for multiple door sizes. I just thought that this was a super neat way that you could make barn doors for any type of a project for really, really cheap. So of course, this place was packed full of items that I could break down, but I want to see how you do with breaking some things down. So I'm going to show you some other photos from this cabin. If you see something that you like, just screenshot it or take a picture of the TV and start breaking them down. So this first item is a tissue box that I thought was super neat and that would sell like crazy. And then these next couple of pictures are of magazine or book holders that you could pretty much design up to fit any area. Then for any of those out there with a laser cutter or a CNC, here's some awesome wall art that I found all throughout the cabin. And for anyone out there that uses toilet paper, which I hope is everyone, unless you have one of those fancy squirting toilets that shoots water. I don't know, but toilet paper. Check out this super cool toilet paper holder. I mean, if you can make something that holds toilet paper photo worthy, you've done something right. And that's all that they have done is used common plumbing parts. So I know that that last one, the toilet paper holder, wasn't made out of wood, but I was using that as an example of being creative. Took some spare parts laying around and made something super unique. And that is the name of every maker's game, regardless of what material that you use. Think outside of the box, have confidence in your creative skills, and your possibilities are endless. Until next time, we'll see you.